Have you ever met someone who didn't raise their voice, didn't threaten, didn't even frown, and yet, somehow, made your skin crawl? It wasn't what they said. It wasn't what they did. It was something else. A silent alarm ringing deep inside your gut. A sensation that something wasn't quite right, even though everything seemed fine. Their smile was too polished, as if it had been rehearsed 1,000 times in front of a mirror. Their gaze too steady, like the eyes of someone pretending to be present, but actually watching you from behind a mask. As if something else, something unspoken, ancient, and unacknowledged, was hiding behind their eyes. Not evil, not malicious, but deeply unsettling. Something they didn't even know was there. Carl Jung had a name for this invisible presence. He called it the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves we exile from consciousness. Not because it's monstrous, but because it's inconvenient, because it doesn't fit the image we want to project. And this is where the danger begins. The shadow isn't content to stay buried. It leaks. It projects. It finds ways to surface, especially through the people we choose to see as wrong, bad, or broken. But the real threat isn't that we carry shadows. We all do. The true danger starts when we stop recognizing them as our own and start only seeing them in others. That's when projection takes over. And suddenly, we're not seeing the world anymore. We're seeing ourselves, fragmented, denied, and multiplied, across everyone we meet. In this video, we'll explore the haunting precision of shadow projection, how it turns ordinary people into mirrors of our own unacknowledged darkness, why those who seem the most spiritual, the most loving, the most composed, may in fact be the most psychologically fractured. We'll reveal how the unconscious mind can twist morality into manipulation, transform truth into dogma, and convert perception itself into a carefully curated prison. Because in the vast, layered realm of the psyche, not everything hidden is harmless, and not everyone who seems good is safe. Let's begin. Carl Jung didn't invent the idea of darkness within. Long before psychology had a language, spiritual traditions, myths, and philosophies all pointed toward it, the hidden side of human nature. But Jung gave it something far more dangerous, a name, a structure, and a terrifying intimacy. He called it the shadow. It's made of everything you reject about yourself, the traits you've been taught to despise, the impulses you were told were wrong, the thoughts you judge as unacceptable, shameful, or not like you. Everything you couldn't safely express, so you learned to bury it. But these disowned parts don't vanish. They don't evaporate with time or moral effort. They don't disappear because you ignore them. They retreat. They descend into the depths of the unconscious, like exiles in your own mind, watching, waiting, gaining strength in silence. They are not dead. They are dormant. And the moment life strikes the right emotional chord, the moment someone triggers the buried emotion, the unresolved conflict, they don't stay hidden. They rise, and they project. Projection is the psyche's emergency mechanism, a desperate maneuver when the self refuses to face its own truth. When we cannot, or will not, own what we carry, we cast it like a shadow on others. It's not me who's angry, it's you. Not me who's insecure, you must be. Not me who's manipulative. Look closer at them. Not my guilt, not my fear, not my pain. It must belong to someone else. And we believe this with conviction because it feels real. In small doses, projection is normal. It's part of how we try to organize the chaos of emotional life. But when it becomes a pattern, when it defines how we relate to others, it turns into something far more insidious. A psychic distortion so potent that it can unravel relationships, collapse trust, and poison entire communities from the inside out. It distorts perception, confuses intention, and convinces us we're fighting evil outside of us, when the real battle is within. Because in that moment, you're not really responding to the person in front of you. You're not listening. You're not perceiving. You're hallucinating. You're engaging with your own rejected self, dressed in someone else's form. You are not in a relationship anymore. You are in a projection, a drama written by your unconscious, performed by an unsuspecting cast, and unless you wake up to it, the show will go on. So how do you know when projection is happening? It's subtle, deceptively subtle, often so well disguised that your rational mind dismisses it, calls it a misunderstanding, an overreaction, a bad vibe. But your instincts, they don't lie. They tighten your chest. They make your stomach twist. They whisper in quiet urgency, something's wrong here. At first, it's just a flicker of discomfort in an otherwise normal interaction. But then it grows. You begin to feel misunderstood, not in a casual way, but in a deep existential way. Like someone is seeing you through a lens you never agreed to. Like they're not talking to you, but to an idea of you they've constructed in their own mind. It's as if someone has rewritten your character and handed you a script you've never seen, yet now you're expected to play along. You feel misrepresented, misread, judged not for who you are, but for what you unknowingly represent to them. They accuse you of things you never said, assign motives you never felt, and the most unsettling part, they do it with absolute certainty. There's no room for clarification, no space for correction. Their version of you is fixed, and they've already decided what role you play in their story. You're not in a conversation anymore. You're not even in a disagreement. You've stepped into a psychological battlefield you didn't choose. You are standing in the crossfire of someone else's internal war. You've become a screen and their shadow. Everything they can't face in themselves is the film being projected onto you, scene by scene, line by line, none of it yours. And yet somehow you're the main character. The more fragmented they are inside, the more vivid and convincing the projection becomes. Their unresolved chaos demands clarity, so it paints you as the villain. And if you're not careful, if you haven't done your own inner work, you might start believing it. You might begin to question yourself. Am I really like that? Did I do something wrong? That's the final twist of projection. It doesn't just distort reality. It rewrites it. And if you let it, it will seduce you into living inside that illusion. Jung warned us. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who openly hate you. They're the ones who sincerely believe, with complete conviction, that you are everything they cannot bear to face in themselves. Projection doesn't always wear the face of hostility. It doesn't always shout, accuse, or rage. Sometimes, it wears a halo. It glows. It smiles. It speaks softly and slowly, as if touched by higher wisdom. There are people who seem enlightened, always calm, always compassionate, always appearing to do the right thing. They radiate serenity. They speak in soft, measured tones. They quote ancient texts. They talk about love and light, higher vibrations, transcendence. At first, it feels comforting, elevating. You find yourself drawn to them, to their stillness, to their certainty. But look closer, feel deeper, because beneath that radiant surface, something else is moving. Something rigid, something righteous, something that cannot, will not be questioned. And when you disagree with them, you don't just offer a different point of view. You don't just challenge an idea. You become the enemy of truth, the obstacle to light, the villain in their carefully curated moral universe. This is not kindness. This is not awakening. This is the spiritual ego. And it's one of the most seductive and dangerous expressions of shadow projection. Because when someone fully identifies with an archetype, the savior, the guru, the messenger, the wounded healer, they no longer see themselves as human. They become a vessel, a channel, a representative of something higher. And in their eyes, they are beyond reproach. Criticism, not feedback, it's betrayal. Disagreement, not curiosity, it's heresy. Boundaries, not healthy. They are seen as disrespectful, even sacrilegious, because in their mind, they're not expressing personal thoughts or preferences. They're delivering sacred insight, channeling purity, defending absolute truth. And if they are pure, then any resistance to them must be impure. But behind the mask of virtue is often a terrified ego, a self that has built its entire identity on rejecting its own shadow, a self that cannot admit to being wrong, because doing so would unravel the spiritual persona it worked so hard to build. And the more perfect the mask appears, the more pressurized, chaotic, and volatile the shadow beneath it becomes. The danger isn't just that they've rejected their darkness. It's that they genuinely believe, deep in their bones, that they've transcended it. And that belief makes them certain. And certainty, without self-awareness, is the seed of every spiritual delusion. Imagine someone who never makes mistakes, who always says the right thing, smiles at the right time, and seems to fit perfectly into every room they enter. They're polished, charming, impeccably adapted to social norms. They know what's expected of them, and they deliver it flawlessly every single time. But something about them feels off, not wrong in any obvious way, but subtly, disturbingly artificial. Like you're interacting with a projection rather than a person. Carl Jung called this carefully curated identity the persona, a mask we craft to navigate society. A socially acceptable version of ourselves, shaped by culture, upbringing, and expectation. And in moderation, it's necessary. It allows us to function, to relate, to survive. But when someone becomes the persona, when there's nothing behind the mask but more mask, they lose something essential, authenticity, and your instincts can feel it, even when your mind can't explain it. It's not what they say that unsettles you, it's what you don't feel when they say it. A flicker of absence behind their eyes, a slight delay in emotional resonance, a performance too rehearsed, too clean, as if spontaneity, contradiction, and raw humanity have been surgically removed in favor of consistency and control. They are perfectly composed, but disturbingly hollow, because here's the paradox. The more perfect the surface appears, the more chaotic the depths often are. When a person sacrifices their inner world to maintain an immaculate outer image, the shadow doesn't vanish. It retreats. It hides in the cracks of the mask, and it festers. Every unexpressed emotion, every repressed instinct, every denied truth, boiling beneath the polished exterior. And eventually, it erupts. Not as a gentle release, but as a psychic rupture. A moment when all the carefully managed perfection shatters into something unrecognizable and often uncontrollable. Because no one can fake being whole forever. There's a moment, a subtle, chilling moment, when someone looks at you, and for a split second, they are no longer there. Their face is the same. Their voice hasn't changed. Their words might still sound reasonable, but something else, something deeper, older, colder, has taken over. It's not madness. It's not possession in the Hollywood sense. It's far more dangerous than that. This is what Jung called archetypal possession, when the ego loses its footing and is overtaken by a force from the collective unconscious. Not just an emotion, not just an impulse, but a mythic identity. They are no longer a full person. They are an idea wearing a body. It might be the savior, the judge, the martyr, the prophet, or the righteous victim. And whatever it is, it speaks through them with terrifying certainty. No ambiguity, no doubt, no hesitation, just pure conviction, as if they've been chosen by something greater. This is why some leaders captivate thousands, not with logic, but with presence. Their words seem sacred. Their energy feels like destiny. Their certainty provides comfort in a world that feels too complex to bear. But beneath that magnetism lies a dangerous illusion, the belief that they are no longer human, that they are something higher, wiser, untouchable. And if they are divine, then you, by contrast, must be lesser, flawed, ignorant, in need of correction or elimination. Archetypal possession strips away the gray areas. It flattens reality into good versus evil, chosen versus condemned. It removes nuance. And where nuance dies, fanaticism is born. It doesn't matter how kind they seem. Once possessed, they are no longer speaking as themselves, but as something far more ancient and far less forgiving. Some people don't change, not because they don't want to, but because something deeper, more hidden, won't let them. They find themselves in the same arguments, with different faces in different cities, but somehow, the plot is always the same. They date the same kind of person, emotionally unavailable, controlling or chaotic. They fight the same kinds of battles, power struggles, abandonment fears, invisible wounds flaring up at familiar triggers. They fall into the same pain, the same heartbreak, the same breakdowns, no matter where they go or who they're with. This isn't bad luck. This isn't the universe being cruel. And it's certainly not coincidence. This is what Jung called the compulsion to repeat. When trauma is not integrated, when old wounds go unexamined, they don't just sit quietly in the background. They magnetize your life. They pull you, unconsciously, relentlessly, back into the very dynamics that hurt you, over and over again, until you finally stop running and face what's inside. But most don't see it. They don't recognize the pattern, because it doesn't feel like a pattern. It feels like reality, like fate, or worse, like identity. I guess I attract toxic people. I always get betrayed. This just keeps happening to me. They think it's the world punishing them. But in truth, it's their psyche reenacting the past, trying to resolve what was never healed, trying to finish a story that was never fully told. And here's the most terrifying part. You might not be the protagonist. You might be a supporting character in their unresolved trauma script, a placeholder for someone else. You're cast without audition, given lines you didn't write, handed a role that makes no sense to you, but fits perfectly into their unfinished narrative. And unless you're conscious of it, unless you're grounded in your own clarity, you'll play that role perfectly. You'll act out their story, word for word, without even knowing that a script was ever written. So what now? If the shadow is so dangerous, so deceptive, so deeply embedded in who we are, is there a way out? Yes, but not the way most people imagine. Not by purging the darkness, not by pretending it isn't there, and certainly not by chasing perfection. The way out is through integration. Shadow integration doesn't mean eliminating the darker parts of ourselves. It means turning toward them, not to shame them, not to act them out in self-destruction, but to understand them, to take responsibility for them, to own them fully and honestly. It means admitting we are not always kind, not always selfless, not always right. It means having the courage to say, I have the capacity for harm. I have lied. I have judged unfairly. I have wanted things I wasn't proud of. And it means understanding that none of this makes you evil. It makes you human. This is what Jung meant when he said, I would rather be whole than good. Because being good can be a performance. It can be a mask, a costume we wear to be accepted, admired, or in control. But being whole, that requires something far more rare: honesty, self-awareness, humility. When we see the shadow in ourselves, we stop needing to see it in others. We no longer project our inner shame onto those around us. We no longer idealize people to escape our own flaws. We no longer demonize others to avoid facing our own contradictions. We begin to live in reality, not in the fantasy of innocence or the delusion of superiority. And something incredible happens. We become trustworthy, not because we're perfect, but because we're aware. The person who integrates their shadow walks with a quiet kind of power. They don't preach. They don't posture. They don't need to convince anyone of anything. They've made peace with their own depths, and that peace radiates. Not loudly, but unmistakably. They are grounded, present, real, And in a world obsessed with image, addicted to approval, and terrified of imperfection, that kind of presence is revolutionary. Now that you've seen these signals, these subtle but unmistakable signs of shadow at work, have you recognized them in someone close to you? A friend who always blames others, a partner who turns every disagreement into a moral failure, a leader who radiates certainty but shuts down dissent, or have you seen traces of them in the mirror? That moment when you overreacted, when you judged too quickly, when you misunderstood someone, not because of what they did, but because of what you projected onto them. It's a hard truth, but an honest one. We all carry shadows, not just the broken, not just the dangerous, everyone. And sometimes we are the very danger we fear in others. But the difference that defines your entire psychological path, lies in what you do with that knowledge. You can deny it, minimize it, blame others, and let the shadow live your life for you. Or you can turn inward, face the discomfort, ask the hard questions, and slowly, painfully, courageously, take your life back. This isn't about moral superiority. It's not about judging others or slapping labels on their behavior. It's about awareness. To know when someone is projecting onto you and not take it personally. To know when you are projecting onto them and take responsibility. To tell the difference between authentic virtue and a carefully constructed mask, between spiritual depth and spiritual performance. Because not every light is truth, and not every darkness is evil. Some light is blinding, some darkness is fertile, and often the path to healing wins right through what you're most afraid to see. Shadow integration is the quiet revolution of the soul. It doesn't get applause. It doesn't win awards. It won't make you look perfect, but it will make you real, whole, free. And that's the only kind of freedom that truly lasts. So ask yourself, where does your shadow live? Whose face does it wear? What patterns does it repeat? What stories does it whisper when no one else is listening? And what would happen if you stopped running and dared to meet it? Thank you for watching. If this message stirred something in you, share it. Comment your reflections. Tell us what resonated, what challenged you, what made you pause, and subscribe to continue exploring the hidden forces that shape us. Because transformation, real, lasting transformation, always begins with a single, silent, brave act of awareness.